All right, I'm here with Adanta Ahononu, member of the Helia Collective, and we worked on a piece together about structure is how you love your team. And so, Adanta, one of the things I love so much about our interview is your perspective that creating clarity is a leadership strategy. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first off, let me so exciting to be here and with you, and I just really admire the work that the collective does. But yeah, for me, I think over time, I've had the opportunity to both work under and alongside, and then lead individuals and teams, and learn about like the power of creating clarity to be effective in the work. And so for me, over time, that's meant creating resources that allow me to be more effective and to almost like operationalize different elements of my work, and therefore allow my teams to then be able to like replicate and model the same. And so there's a few tools that I'm excited today to be able to share with you, and like how I've done that over time.
Amazing. Well, one of the things that I've was dying to see is your onboarding plan. Can you take us through that and how it starts to create that structure for a new hire?
Yeah, definitely. So this is an onboarding plan that actually initially sat for many years across different organizations in a spreadsheet. And over time, I've evolved it, and now about 2 years ago at Co-op, we started using Monday.com. It's actually moved and upgraded from the spreadsheet to Monday.com, which is now where I've moved the document. But what it allows is both for new team members coming in to have some structure and where I want them to learn across the different areas of our organization, but also the like space to organize their days in ways that allow them to have a bit of autonomy in their schedule. So I used to like pack every single hour of a new hire's schedule, and they'd be like, okay, I didn't even have time to like create the schedule and structure that I wanted. And so now what I do is I create this onboarding plan, which we'll look at in just a moment, that allows them to say, okay, great, for like week one, here's the high priorities of what I want you to focus in on. Here's some of the things I want you to look at in the first week, second week, first month, first 30, 60, 90 days, and then be able to have ongoing conversations throughout their onboarding around that. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
As it's coming up, I'm just cringing thinking about the minute by minute onboarding schedules I've put together for new hires and how overwhelming that must have been for them.
Yes. So here is an example of that onboarding plan. And what you're looking at here, again, as I mentioned, this is in the Monday.com platform. You could, I imagine, use other platforms, of course, as well. But how I've organized this is the first section is kind of this first 30 days high level. And so you have, okay, if this new hire is starting week 1, 2, 3, 4, the dates that they're starting, the priority of if it's the first week, again, first 2 to 3, first month, as they progress through the onboarding plan, the status of that item, and then there's a point of contact. So if they run into any issues, who's the person and their role, since again, they're new, they're trying to learn who these people are, what's the first and last name and the role of that person. There's a point of contact if they run into any challenges. And then if I scroll over, I have this notes section where sometimes I'll add any additional layers of insights, and I'll attach relevant files that they might need to review. So you'll see that across this whole kind of onboarding plan. But what I started doing, and I used to not have this 30-day high level, and what I found is sometimes folks would say, okay, we know like on a tactical level what my first 30, 60, 90 days look like, but if I zoom out Adanta, like what should I be kind of prioritizing in that first week and that second week and that third and that fourth, since in that first month is really critical to understanding any org. And so if I click on this as an example, I've kind of created then this like, okay, if this is a team member's first week, here's the high level, what I want you to focus in on the first week. And then on a high level, also here are the key meetings. Sometimes in your first week, you're trying to navigate which meetings do I have on what days. It's obviously in your calendar. You're trying to learn how you navigate and learn that calendar. But this allows me to say, okay, this is where I want you to prioritize on a high level of your time, right? Familiarizing yourself with the onboarding plan, right? Getting set up in systems, platforms, etc. And then here's some of your key meetings. Let's confirm that these meetings are actually on your calendar, right? Because sometimes when folks are starting, you miss so let's confirm they're on your calendar. And then here's some just like insights as you're heading into these meetings for you to be thinking about and how I want you to participate in those. And so at the beginning of each week for that first month, we are starting that Monday, kind of spending a few minutes looking and grounding on that, and then looking at some of these other sections. And so there's a section around like learning about the organization. And so in this case, it's like co-op and our staff. And so it has resources around our core values, around the employee handbook, around our org chart, which I often direct folks to, of like, you're gonna be learning a lot of names. Here's the org chart and the structure. And then on our website, we actually have pictures of staff. And so it's kind of helpful for folks to then orient like, oh, I'm about to go on this meeting with X person. Here's what they look like. And so they're able to go through and understand, okay, what I want them to prioritize looking at within their first week versus first 2 to 3 weeks versus first 30, 60, 90 days. Again, they can, as they complete, they can note the status of if they're working on it, if they need access to a document that maybe I forgot to give them access to, if that thing is done. If they are, say, going through the employee handbook and they have a question, they could make a note to follow up in our next check-in, or they could actually just comment here and say, hi, at Adanta as an example, and then note their question so that I could actually answer that asynchronously as well. And so that's allowed, again, for just kind of like real-time support in between the different synchronous meetings that we have.
This is so much more organized than any onboarding I've ever done for someone. Can I ask, like, compared to other places or when you've been onboarded yourself elsewhere where this hasn't existed, what difference does this make for folks?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think folks are able to get to understand the organizational landscape so much more quickly and start to be able to like see themselves embedded into the work and understand how they can like more quickly make an impact. Two, they're able to actually build trust and credibility more quickly because both they're starting to understand and learn the language, the tools. They are able to understand, okay, for this first week, it's really important that I'm starting to get to shadow some of our student programming. We know how important it is to ensure that no matter what level of the organization you're at, no matter what role you're in, you're understanding the foundation of what we do. And while it seems obvious that like anyone who's starting at any organization would understand the priority in meeting with your direct reports right away or shouting program, it's actually not obvious to everyone. And so actually creating some of that like structure ahead of time and setting those expectations ahead of time actually allow folks to be set up for success in how they are moving into and through the organization. And so for me, it's been really helpful, as you can see here, to then have each of these sections around like connection, collaboration, our technology tools, because again, every organization has their own version of tools. And so it's helpful to map that out. And again, in the notes, you can see like, here's how we use the tools and here's some resources to the tools as you're getting to hear someone talk about what a specific tool is. There's some organizational, so this is kind of the section that I mentioned that we'll talk about in a bit of the ways in which I've organized myself in ways that feel meaningful to me. And so I offer this as like, if this works for you, great. If not, ignore it. But wanted to share this as you're setting up your organizational systems in your first few weeks. Staff get to know you, the staff meetings I want them to prioritize within their first, again, usually like week to first month. And so who I want to meet with, what is it about? And then again, typically I remove the point of contact for this video, but typically there would be like the point of contact of who they're reaching out to. And then you can see any recurring meetings would be listed so that they can confirm they're on their calendar. Anything connected to my broader functions that I want them to read about would be under this section. And then depending on the function that I'm onboarding for, specific resources connected to that specific function, say program or social work or employer partnerships would be listed here as well.
I have so many questions about this, and I want to make sure we get to your one-to-ones. But the one question I was thinking about is like, how did this get built? Like, what are all the questions you need to ask yourself before you can build something of this quality?
Yeah, I mean, I will say a lot of this has been built over time. So it's like even from like before I worked at my current organization to my past organization, even before that, it's like what I've learned about when I'm onboarding a team member and they've shared, hey, I wish I had X, or they asked me a question like, oh, I could have included that tool into the system. Or, ooh, I realized that having an explicit technology section to list out all of our different platforms is really helpful in ways that didn't exist. Or, oh, that 30-day high level. So it's evolved over time. But for me, often the questions like I'm thinking about is like, okay, if I am like new to this organization and I do not know anything outside of what I learned throughout the hiring process, without being overwhelmed, because you know there's like that fire hose when you first start any organization, what is the best way to both give the individual starting the like high level picture of where I want them to be spending their time when they first start? What are the systems and structures that I'd like them to set up in those first few weeks, because we know it's a lot easier to set up your email inbox structure, calendar structure before your inbox has 1,000 emails in it. So what can I support you in setting up, or your Slack sections ahead of time? And then what are the key resources that, again, as a new team member, in understanding holistically the organization or your function as you're coming in, that you need to know to then be able to like eventually connect the dots. And so I think, again, as I mentioned, when I first created these documents years ago, it was every single hour was mapped out for the week. And now I've really shifted to like allowing for the autonomy for folks to both have some of the structure and the calendar holes that have been sent in the high level, while also having this ability to like work through and filter for their first week and their second week of priorities and tasks for them to get through.
Incredible. I wish you could onboard me, which feels like a weird thing to say. That would be so helpful. I want to make sure we've got time to look at all this cool stuff. So if we could jump to your one-to-one agendas.
Yes.
One of the things I loved in the piece we wrote together was about, like, you talk about designing for human connection. And I noticed there are ways in that in many places, but especially in the one-to-one. So take us through that.
Absolutely. So this is a sample of one of my one-to-one agenda templates that anytime a new hire is starting, I share this template with them, and I name that we can evolve some elements of this over time so that it feels right to them. But that my hope is that by having this template, it both allows for that human connection, it allows to ensure that I'm getting insight into the parties that are most important to the work, that I'm able to provide the guidance and thought partnership that team members need, while feeling in the loop, and then also able to add in the things that I can answer for any team members. And so the way that I really structured this is, as you can see here, the kind of like first piece is around human connection. I think that is like so critical. I think there's like so many stats that it's like, as you get older, like the people you spend the most time with in your life are your coworkers. And so building that human connection, having fun, understanding wins and celebrations, I think is so important. And so one, it's often important for me to understand like where people's energy meter is at for that week. If someone says full, great. If someone's saying semi-empty, that might be a flag for me that there's their capacity. There might be overcapacity as a way that I need to lean in or help them reprioritize. These last two questions I love. One is I ask them like, what is one achievement like you're most proud of recently? And that can be connected to work or not. And so that often just allows for like really beautiful personal connections. One team member recently shared like, oh, I recently got asked to be on my first nonprofit board. And I was like, that's amazing. And like, that may not have surfaced in like, without that like specific probe. Another team member helped someone in their network that we had a mutual connection get a job recently, and they want to excel. And I was like, that's incredible. Like, oh my God. And then someone else talked about being able to create a Salesforce dashboard for the first time and like really feeling confident in what they created. And so it allows for those like human moments and to be able to, again, celebrate those micro wins that sometimes we just like let pass on a day-to-day basis. And then this next question I add, it's really intentional, is around like either any individual or team wins. So in my leadership role, I'm not having one-to-ones with team members on the ground on a day-to-day basis. And it's important for me to like be able to hear and know like the amazing work that's happening across the organization. And so this is where my leaders get to like celebrate their teams and individuals on their team. And I love this section because it's often then a moment that I get to then reach out to that team member, and I often will do so via Slack in a short note, and you'll say, hey, so-and-so, your manager just told me that like you recently facilitated an event with Microsoft and you actually killed it. Like, I just want to say thank you for what you did. And it's a great moment for us to then also connect and to have that human connection via Slack. But also that person feels like, oh, wow, my manager is talking about me in my check-in, and like really just creates a culture of transparency, gratitude, celebration in ways that I think feel really good and exciting and meaningful to the team.
Well, I've been recently reading about like the concept of mattering, and that this is just one beautiful way to help people know that they matter to the org, that their contributions are valuable and they are being seen. I think that's so much of what it comes down to. And I think from a distributive leadership perspective, you're sitting in a chief position. And so like, I think this is a brilliant way to be able to skip levels and like take those levels away to see what's going on and help connect with those folks. So that is just, I'm stealing that for mine, because usually I'll focus on what's your win, but this is like an amazing sort of bigger view of the org, and I think that's really fantastic.
I appreciate you sharing that. Thank you. And then, yeah, these other sections have just upcoming PTO reminders to make sure folks feel supported as they do so. Feedback, we often say, right, feedback like is a gift. Sometimes folks just don't know how to wrap it in a bow, but I actually do want to be able to solicit feedback, and not only from my team members of what I can do to better support them in their work, but also feedback that's bubbling up from their teams, from and insights or innovations that their team is sharing. And this often, again, just like gets conversations flowing of insights that I might have known about or thought about that other team members might be hearing in some of the spaces. And so an example recently was we were going through some evolution and change, and a team member was able to elevate like, hey, you know, one area that I think in the next town hall we should really focus on is X, based on some of the things that are bubbling up from my team. And like that's valuable feedback that I want to make sure that like we're making time and space for in our check-ins. And these last few sections around being able to really bucket the like focus of our time together. And so what are just like FYs and or quick hits that I could technically read asynchronously, but that allow me to be in the loop. And might even just be that like someone's team member just made an offer for a new hire, as an example. Like here's the link to their LinkedIn. We're so excited to have them join. And then this piece is often we spend the most time on, which is around thought partnership and guidance. And so where either that team member might want my thought partnership in a specific topic, or where they're like, I cannot move forward until I have your guidance on this. And so they're able to list those things ahead of time, and then we have those conversations. And then, of course, I'll add in any items I have. And so my expectation for my team is that these agendas are being completed prior to the start of our meetings. It's one document that's an ongoing agenda. So over time, it's just in one document. And thanks to Google, and this is like not even a Google plug, but now with the different pages, it allows for that more seamlessly, which is incredible. And the tabs, but that has been really helpful to like stay in one single document as an ongoing space to refer to, and to be able to like ensure that these our one-to-one time together can feel really meaningful.
That's brilliant. And I really, really like the feedback framing, especially, and then the way that you get the priority discussions out. That's solid. I think this is the one that has been elusive to me. I think I'm pretty good at one-to-ones. I'm not as good at onboarding, but I've had decent. I am terrible at role clarity frameworks. Can you talk to us how you all use Rapid and Mocha to make life better on a day-to-day basis?
Yes, definitely. I'll share that this really surfaced for us a few years ago, where as an organization, it was kind of the like who's on first and trying to figure out, okay, who's the final decision maker in this? And, oh, I thought this was my call, this is your call. Or wait, did we get input from the right people? And so it was something that we were experiencing across all levels of the organization. And so I decided to just start actually reaching out to some peers across my network. And as an organization, we had already worked really closely with the Management Center resource around Mocha and understanding how to use that as a project management tool. And that was serving us really well, but there was still something missing around, okay, well, before you even get the project, if you need to make a decision on, okay, are we going to add a new program track, as an example? Before we can start even designing the track, there needs to be like a decision that's made. And whose decision is that? Is that my decision, right? Is that the CEO's decision? Is that the design leader's decision? And so as I started asking around, a theme that kept surfacing was the RAPID framework. And the RAPID framework essentially, and I'm going to bring this up here, there's many resources around this. The one that we initially grounded ourselves in is the Bridgespan Group's version. But in it, it talks about how the RAPID is kind of this acronym for the recommend, the agree, the perform, the input, and the decide. And this, for us, has been a really strong way for us to be able to clarify in both big and small decisions, like who is the recommender, the person often who's doing the most work to gather input and get the folks under agree to align with the recommendation, for then the D, aka the decider, to make that final decision. And once that has all happened, whoever is listed as perform, which can be more than one person, is then the folks who then, in the Mocha framework, become the owners in the Mocha of that project, right? So say, again, we're trying to decide if we want to add a new financial services track in Chicago. Once we decide, okay, yes, we want to do that, there's now a project of, okay, well, what needs to happen? What needs to happen across our recruiting team, communications, across marketing, across the program design team, and designing that curriculum, et cetera. And there's now a project with a clear owner, a manager, right, accountable, the helpers, the consultant, and Mocha to make that happen. And so because at the time our organization had already been using Mocha and we were now introducing this new rapid decision framework, one of the first questions I got when I introduced this initially to our exec team was like, okay, but what's the difference between Mocha and Rapid? And so I sat with that for a while and then eventually ended up creating an internal document that kind of like helped team members understand the difference between Mocha and Rapid. And again, Rapid being the decision-making framework that then once a decision was made would then kick off a project that might be a big or small project, that those under the perform section for Rapid become the owner of the project under the Mocha, the project being executed. And so that internal document is one we've now kind of evolved and strengthened over time. We're still working to kind of perfect exactly how we use Mocha and Rapid together, but I think this has been like a huge win for us in ways that someone can come into a meeting and say, hey, I was just in a meeting with another cross-functional leader and kind of everyone was confused. Like, are you going to be the decider, or is that me, or is that this other person? And we can, in less than a minute, type out RAPID and then say, okay, equals, okay, this person is the recommend, this person is the agree, this person the decide, and then have that clarity for then folks to go back and move the decision or for Mocha the project forward.
Amazing. I know that takes practice and a lot of work. So I haven't grasped it instantly, but like I'm already at a new level from where I was before. As we wrap up, Adanta, can you share some of the fun things that you have embedded into your culture? Some things in Slack or in meetings that really are the culture building moments on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll stop sharing for a moment just so I can see. But yeah, so I think one of the things that I share this at the beginning, right, is that like we often spend the most time with our coworkers, and I'm someone who likes to work hard and also like have fun and be playful, enjoy the time, and be able to ensure that folks feel valued and celebrated and have those moments together of connection. And I feel fortunate. I mean, in the culture of co-op, it's already something that was like very well embedded into our organizational culture. And there was a few specific practices that I brought over from my former organization that either I or others had implemented that have really been operationalized at our organization to make things feel really meaningful. And so one of those things, I shared my kind of onboarding plan. One of the things that's in that plan is every single team member who joins the organization is assigned a welcome buddy. And this is actually something that came up in my former organization, my former team. And as we were onboarding a ton of new team members as we were growing, a team member at the time said, hey, it'd be really great if like when I started, I had someone who like wasn't my boss, but someone who's like a peer who could help me get to understand the organization and the culture a bit more, given some of the nuanced and unique pieces. And so one of the things then I worked with the team to do is kind of build out kind of guidelines of what it might look like for us to at the time call them culture buddies. And it worked really well that when a new team member started, they were assigned to a culture buddy that met with them for the first really 3 to 6 months on what would start out weekly and biweekly, but then become monthly. Just have that human check-in of like, hey, do you all use, is that language, do you call them fellows or students? Or hey, I was gonna go to a co-working day. When I go to the co-working day, I just wanna make sure, can I wear a t-shirt or do I have to dress it like, and just some of those like unique moments. Hey, I was in this call and I saw someone use an emoji. Are we a big emoji organization? Like, how does that work?
Those things that you can't even fit in your very detailed onboarding doc.
Yeah,
those
right.
questions that inevitably come
Yeah,
up.
and like just that human connection, and sometimes just having that like outside of your boss of like, hey, how does some of those pieces work? And so that's something when I came to co-op, I brought to co-op. We now evolved and call them our welcome buddies. But it's been a really meaningful way for staff, even across regions and roles, to build connection. And now kind of folks will proudly be like, that's my onboarding buddy, like, years later. So that's like one piece. Another, and this was during the pandemic, and again, something else that in my former team, my former organization, we started doing, which was having like a gratitude channel and being able to share gratitude for each other. That actually initially was like literally physical notes, and then when the pandemic hit, became virtual. And so for our organization, we then, about maybe 2-3 years ago now, introduced what we actually call the shout-outs channel. And that channel is a channel that all staff across the organization have access to. And at any given time, it's really meant for some of those like quick moments of appreciation and celebration. Like shout out to X person for covering the information session for me, or shout out to Y person for doing an amazing job facilitating a funder meeting and jumping in last minute, or shout out to this team member who just spent a day on Capitol Hill talking to legislators about X topic. And so it's really a fun way for staff across the organization to both feel celebrated and be able to celebrate others in some of these smaller ways that not everyone always has visibility into on a day-to-day basis. And that has been like a really beautiful way for folks to feel that appreciation. Maybe the last two things I'll share is we have been really intentional as an organization of having warm-up and closing affirmations. And I think one thing that has for us been really important, and for me has always been really important, is to ensure that we're consistently embedding those moments of like connection into meetings, especially those like team meetings that are reoccurring, or even, as I shared earlier, those one-to-one meetings for human connection. And so instead of me always being the person to come up with a warm-up question or closing affirmation, we rotate. And so what I created is something that ahead of time at the beginning of the year, I have staff sign up for a recurring meeting to facilitate the warm-up question for a specific meeting, and then staff to facilitate a closing affirmation that really kind of recenters the team and what was discussed. And that's been a really beautiful way for us to just see people creatively bring new ways to build connection with team members on both. Takes off the weight of the person who's like often facilitating, and it's like really fun moments where we get to build that human connection, get to know each other in like fun and different and unique ways. And the last I'll share is around motivation presentations. This is something that actually came from my former organization like many years ago when I was on the East Coast, and we used to do these for our students, where students had an opportunity to share what motivated them with staff. And to me, that was just like one of the most powerful ways that we could get to know the students on a deeper level, and then they could get to know staff as well. And so I brought that from the East Coast to my West Coast team, and we continued that trend across our region. And then since joining my current organization, that now has become any new team member who starts the organization creates like 3 to 5 slide motivation presentation of like what motivates them and what's their why. And then during their first all-staff meeting, they get to present that out, and you get to see all their creativity and thoughtfulness. And some people will have music and collages and photo and all the things, and just a really beautiful way for other staff to get to know the new team members as they're joining, and for that new team member to really be able to express themselves for the group.
Never heard of a motivation presentation, and I absolutely love that. That is feels like such a great way on all sides for someone to showcase who they are, but also for folks to get to know. And one of the hardest things, one of the through lines of your piece was like all of the structure and culture you create is what gets you through the stormy days at work, right? And so much of that is assuming the best about others is one critical component. And starting with something like that gets everybody off on that foot. Like, it's important to that person, really humanizes them. It builds empathy. It's just brilliant. Adanta, thank you so much for sharing your brilliance with us.
Thank you,
I think we got through about half of all the things that you do that are just probably a quarter or fraction of everything you do. And so we'll have to do more. But thank you for sharing with us everything you do to build structure and culture.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this time.